Hey there, everyone, and welcome to Pour and Explore, a wine, food, and travel podcast. I'm your host, Nick Elliott, the wine guy. I'd love to be your go-to guide for all things wine, food, and the amazing places they take us. Here on Pour and Explore, we'll sip, savor, and wander through the exciting world of wine, discuss incredible cuisines, and uncover the stories behind unforgettable destinations. Each week, I'll bring you lively conversations with wine experts, chefs, travel pros, and fellow enthusiasts. We'll share practical tips, hilarious tales, and plenty of inspiration to fuel your next adventure. So grab a glass, pull up a chair, and join me as we pour, explore, and celebrate the good life. Let's dive in. Hey there, wine lovers, foodies, and flavor adventurers. Welcome back to Pour and Explore, the podcast where we sip, savor, and set out on delicious journeys across the world. And I am your host, Nick Elliott. I'm a certified sommelier, wine educator, and today we are going to be stepping into the kitchen and talking about one of my favorite things, cooking with wine. You know, we've all seen the recipes that call for a splash of red or a glug of white or maybe even a fancy wine reduction, but let's be real. Not all wine-infused dishes turn out amazing. If you've ever ended up with a bitter sauce or a weirdly purple stew or a dish that just doesn't taste quite right, well, you're not alone. So today, we're going to be breaking it all down. What wines to cook with, what wines, more importantly, not to cook with, and how to actually make your food taste better, not just boozier. So grab a glass and maybe a wooden spoon, and let's cook with wine like a pro. All right, first things first, before we dive into the how-to, let's clear up some big myths about cooking with wine. Number one, the alcohol in wine burns off when you cook. Reality is nope. Depending on the cooking time, up to 85% of the alcohol can remain in the wine, in the dish that you are producing. Flambeing, for example, you know what we do to crepes Suzette and cherries Jubilee and all of that good stuff. When we hit that flame to the wine, to the alcohol, some of it is going to burn off, but not all of it. And if you're simmering something in wine, like a coq au vin, which we'll talk about in a little while, most of the alcohol is going to remain in that dish. Myth number two, you should only cook with cheap wine. A great philosophy is, if you wouldn't drink it, don't cook with it. I've made the mistake myself where I'll just pick up a jug off the bottom shelf of the grocery store. I'll take it home and taste metallic or not right. Points of order, bad wine equals bad flavor in your dish. Myth number three, any wine will work for any dish. Reality of this situation, the wrong wine can ruin a dish, can ruin a meal. You think about the acidity in wine, the sweetness in wine, the tannins that are in that wine. You want to think about all of these things before you pour that bottle into your sauce. So now that we've got that cleared up, let's get into what wines actually work the best in cooking. Sauvignon Blanc, right there at the top of the list. Sauvignon Blanc is bright, it's acidic, is great for seafood and lighter sauces. So definitely you want to keep a nice bottle of Sauvignon Blanc available. Chardonnay, oaked Chardonnay or unoaked Chardonnay, it doesn't necessarily matter because Chardonnay, it's going to be a softer wine. It's going to be nice and buttery, and it's really great for creamy dishes, buttery dishes, and especially poultry or fish. Pinot Grigio or Pinot Gris is another one to have available. Kind of an all-purpose option because it is very crisp, it's very light, and has a pleasant flavor profile of apple or citrus. Makes for a really, really nice sauce starter. The best red wines for cooking, if you're looking for something smooth with lighter tannins and a wine that's great for reductions, I always go to Pinot Noir. Pinot Noir is not only my favorite red wine to drink, I love Pinot Noir. It makes excellent sauces, excellent reductions, thinking red meats, as well as poultry, and even some fishes like salmon is a great option to go along with a nice Pinot Noir reduction. Cabernet Sauvignon, of course, is going to be bigger. It's going to be bolder, but you want to use Cab in dishes that you are going to simmer for long amounts of time, maybe in your slow cooker or in your pressure cooker. Think beef stew, that type of thing. Cabernet Sauvignon is going to get better the longer that you cook it. It's going to reduce and you're going to concentrate those flavors. And I highly, highly recommend that. If you're looking for something to add into like a barbecue sauce or something bigger and bolder that you want maybe some fruit notes to it, try some Zinfandel. Zinfandel has a really, really fun fruit flavor, some spiciness to it. I love making Zinfandel barbecue sauce. Definitely, definitely want to give that a try. And then wines for more sweet dishes, and I'm not necessarily talking about dessert, but chicken marsala, for example, with a little bit of sweetness, braising lamb, maybe you want a little extra sweetness in there. Marsala or Madeira wine are great for those. Marsala and Madeira both can, not always, have a hint of sweetness to them, as these make really, really great wines for finishing a sauce, for chicken, for vegetables. Roasted vegetables with a nice Madeira sauce over top is absolutely stunning. And of course, there's some other great dessert wines that you can cook with are port and sherry. Rich, deep flavors make great wines to put in braised dishes and, of course, for desserts. So now that you've got your wines, let's talk about what not to do when you're cooking with them. All right, I should have said it at the top of the show. I didn't, so I'm going to say it now. If you're not familiar with Nick Elliott, the wine guy, I am also a classically trained chef. I graduated culinary school way back in the 90s. I chefed for a living. I've owned restaurants. I've worked in restaurants. So these are some of my tips, just what you heard for the yeses. And now we're going to talk a little bit about what you do not want to do, or the nots, or the no's for cooking with wine. Mistake number one is adding your wine to your dish too late. You want to let that wine steep. You want to let that wine reduce. You want to add your wine early enough into the preparation of that dish to make sure that the flavors of the wine are integrated into the food that you're making instead of leaving a boozy aftertaste. Think about it like this. If we were to take the dish off the stove in the pot, let's say we're making beef stew, and I were to take a big spoonful of fresh garlic and I was to throw it into that dish, what do you think is going to happen? When everyone tastes it, it's going to taste like a big bowl of garlic. That garlic will need time, that wine will need time to integrate into the dish that you are preparing. Another mistake that we are making is using sweet wines in the wrong places. You do not want to do sweet wine in a coq au vin, for example, which is a braised chicken dish, which I'm going to talk a little bit about in a second because it is one of my favorites. You definitely don't want to use sweet wine in that. Sweet wines are great for glazes and, of course, desserts, but they can ruin a savory dish if you're not using them appropriately. I'm not going to go into too much detail about that, but if you want to learn more, definitely like, subscribe, and comment on this podcast or in socials, and I'll be happy to give you more information about that. And of course, just like drinking a wine, moderation, 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 and start small. Don't add an entire bottle of wine to your dish right off the start. For those of you who like cooking with recipes, of course, that recipe is going to have the exact amount of wine. that you're going to want to put in there. Sometimes you might want a little bit less, sometimes you might want a little bit more. If you're someone like me who doesn't really use recipe books or cookbooks, I cook to taste. So starting with a little bit and then ramping your way up till it gets to the flavor profile that you are looking for. Lastly, another big mistake I find people make when cooking with wine is you forget to balance your flavors. You can make your wine too tart if you're using Sauvignon Blanc. We started off with on that list. Sauvignon Blanc is a very acidic and tart wine. If you use too much, then there are ways to fix it. You can balance that tartness out with a fat like a butter or a cream. And if you use too much of any one thing to give you a bitter taste, you can always add a little pinch of sugar to balance that out. So again, don't overdo it to get started. It's a great thing to do to moderate the amount of any ingredient that you're using in a dish so it's not overwhelming to that finished product. So now that we know what to avoid, let's talk about some killer dishes where wine will actually make the meal shine. We've talked about it several times coming in. So one of my favorite classic dishes that would not be the same without wine is a dish from France, coq au vin, which is a red wine braised chicken dish or poultry dish. And it is the ultimate French comfort dish. Onions, carrots, celery, potatoes, chicken, red wine, garlic, beautiful herbs like thyme, maybe some rosemary, perhaps some sage. But the beautiful thing about dishes like coq au vin is you can make them to taste. There's really no right way to do it. There are classics that you can go find on all recipes and things like that. I will add different things to my pot depending on my mood. A little more herbs someday, some more fresh vegetables someday, and of course, fresh, delicious chicken and the best red wine you can possibly afford to put into that dish is going to make it absolutely stunning. I'm going to put some of my favorite recipes for these upcoming dishes in my show notes, so definitely check those out. All recipes, again, is a great spot to find those. I've tried these recipes myself. I don't necessarily use them, but for someone who likes cooking with recipes, check those out in the show notes. My wife is from Alabama, and she was born and raised in Alabama. My father-in-law is born and raised in Alabama, and he told me once that I made the best mussels that he's ever tried, which coming from someone from the South, I took that as very, very high praise, and I really appreciate it. Thank you, Coach. And mussels with white wine sauce, some shallots, some onions, lots and lots of garlic, and a beautiful Sauvignon Blanc to go along with your mussels. Finish the sauce off with a little bit of butter. I can't even tell you how amazing that is. So please try that out, and you are absolutely going to love it. Pasta with white wine garlic sauce. Start with a little bit of butter in the bottom of your pan. Add your garlic, let that cook a little bit. Then you want to deglaze that pan with your favorite white wine. And then you're going to take your pasta and toss it in at the very end and let that cook down. And holy moly, simple, easy, quick, cheap, and absolutely delicious pasta with white wine, garlic sauce. Can't do any better than that. Sweet dishes, you find yourself a beautiful pear, whether you have Bartlett pears available to you or Anjou pears, doesn't really matter. Cut it in half, take the seeds out, and heat up some red wine and stick that pear half right in that red wine. Let it poach for 5 to 10 minutes on medium heat, low to medium heat, and it makes an elegant and easy dessert. Pair that with a little scoop of vanilla ice cream or something like that. Port and chocolate sauce, what an awesome pairing that is. Sweet, creamy, with a little hint of acid to it. Port and chocolate, absolutely fantastic. Sabayon is another great dish you can prepare. It's a French dish made with Marsala wine, and it's a custard. You'll find a recipe for that in the show notes. It's light, it's fluffy, and it's absolutely amazing. And I highly recommend trying that. So check out those show notes, folks. And now let's wrap it up with a few expert tips to make cooking with wine simple, easy, inexpensive, and effortless. All right, here are some pro tips for cooking with wine. Now, before you go turning your kitchen into a winery, here are some tips for cooking with wine like a boss. First and foremost, I will always marinate my proteins before I cook with them, whether that is a simple oil, lemon juice, salt and pepper, or whatever the case is. Definitely want to marinate your proteins, your poultry, your beef, your lamb, whatever you're cooking. Definitely want to marinate ahead of time. Steak, not as much. I like doing a little with just some salt, pepper, and garlic on top, nice and hot into a pan, medium rare. But everything else I will typically marinate before I cook. And using wine for your marinade, in your marinade, is absolutely fantastic. The keys to a good marinade are acid, of course, oil, and your flavorings, whether that's just going to be straight salt and pepper or you're going to be going for something a little more exotic. It doesn't necessarily matter, but oil and acid are going to be a big part of that marinade. And by acid, I'm talking about wine, of course. I'm talking about vinegar. I'm talking about citrus juice, whether that's orange juice, lemon juice, grapefruit juice, lime juice, etc., etc. So, wine in your marinade for deeper, deeper flavor. You never want to add dairy to a wine that has not been reduced, because what's going to happen is the acid in that wine is going to curdle your dairy product, your wine, your butter. So you definitely always want to reduce your wine before adding any dairy to it. Very, very important. And last, and kind of a aha moment for me, when I was learning how to cook, is make sure you're pairing your drinking wine with your cooking wine. If you're cooking with white wine, I highly recommend drinking white wine along with that dish. If you are cooking with red, I definitely recommend drinking a red wine with that dish, whether it's the same wine, debatable, or it can be something comparable if you are having a Malbec to drink with dinner. Cooking your food in Merlot is not going to be out of the question. So these are some tips for you, some pro tips coming from a chef and a sommelier. I hope that you enjoyed them. And of course, if you're going to be cooking with wine, you might as well be drinking a glass of wine as well. So choose wisely. All right, my fellow wine lovers and home chefs, that is going to wrap up today's episode. Cooking with wine can absolutely elevate your dishes, deepen the flavors, and make your kitchen smell amazing if you do it right. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you subscribe, make sure you leave a review, and check out my website at www.thewineguy.vin. And if you would like to get a copy of my new book, Your Guide to Wine, which has a lot of great free wine and food pairing tips in it. If you want to get a copy of my new book, I'd be happy to share that with you. It's just a 25-page long PDF. And I would love for you to like, subscribe, and comment on this podcast or in social medias, and comment with yes, YES exclamation point, and I will get that to you. Until next time, everyone, keep wondering and wondering. Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Pour and Explore. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your stories, or your questions, so you can drop me a line at cheers@thewineguy.vin. That's cheers@thewineguy.vin. Or let's connect on TikTok, Instagram, or Facebook. Grab those links on my website at thewineguy.vin. Until next time, let's keep wondering and wandering. Cheers, everyone.